Before we dive in, here's some real talk. If you're a leader, entrepreneur, or builder of anything, there's a whole stash of free tools waiting for you at papernapkinwisdom.com. We're talking mindset, strategy, clarity, no catch. Just ask. You can even hit the link in bio and grab what you need to move forward faster.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 284. And this is the exciting finale in our 16-part Freedom series with Michael Walsh. If you've been following along, you already know this journey has been about more than business growth. It's been about what happens when you start asking deeper questions. What does freedom really mean inside a company? What shifts when you stop holding on and start building something that outlasts you? Michael doesn't just talk about change, he shows us how to live it. And in this last chapter, he brings it all together in a way that might surprise you, because it isn't about what you think it's about. So, as you listen, imagine what would be different if your business could truly grow without limits. What doors might open? What weight might lift? And what would it mean for you and the people you lead? Let's dive into this final part of the Freedom series, and when you hear the moment that resonates most with you, write it down on a napkin and share it with us using the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom. Let's listen in. Michael Walsh, welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom. Excited to bring this series to a close. Like we're at the last episode here on this. And I want to thank you. This is an amazing journey and a really enlightening journey around the Freedom Framework. And we've been talking about the danger zones that exist under the surface within an organization as it grows, because it outstrips the structures. Right? As we grow, we outstrip the structures, and the structures entirely relate to people. And the goal here is that just about every business owner, just about every entrepreneur, in fact, every entrepreneur and every business owner wants freedom in the business to do the things they want to do, freedom from the business so they can go away and have a holiday and live a life, and freedom because of the business so they can enjoy the lifestyle that would be commensurate with their business success. And you've developed over 3 decades of experience the Freedom Framework that truly gives business leaders a template for the possibility in a modern context, correct?
Yes.
All right. So in the last 14 episodes, 15 episodes, we've been walking through all of this being episode 16, and we're going to go through the whole framework. So we're going to put it all together, correct?
Hey, let's do it.
Let's do it. So let's start with the first piece, which is the foundation of it all, rethinking the core.
Yes. So of the framework itself. Remember,
Yes.
when people, I talk in the book, you say this applies to everybody, and I'm not going to disagree with that, because I don't disagree with it. And where I focus is on service-based businesses that are based on the expertise of their people. And if somebody walks into business as a practitioner, whether they open their own shop or whether they buy into a business, and become a partner, they focus on the expertise that they bring. And the truth is that's actually appropriate for them to do that. Without the expertise at the table, you're not going to get the results that you want for the client, for your profit, for your people, any of it. You're not going to get any of it without the expertise at the core. That said, there's a lot more to running a business than just bringing the expertise to the table, as far as that's concerned. And so one of the things that, and we've talked a lot about the different issues and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, as a company grows, it outstrips its structures, and the structures are all related to the people. I completely agree with that. So the question is, how do you overcome it? How do you deal with that? Let's just say, and I mean the prime thinking behind that was, what if I treated my business like an intelligent ecosystem rather than like a well-oiled machine? Well-oiled machine is there for the benefit of the owners and the users. An ecosystem is there for the benefit of everybody. And so it changes what's there. Now, it's interesting because as an owner, it's got to also be for me. So it's not just everybody else. It's also there for me, but it's there for all of us. It can't just be there for me
Hmm.
because it just doesn't work that way. And what we said is by understanding human behavior and certain drivers of human behavior, and you combine it with looking at how do I navigate my way through this, then you can actually build a business that gives you freedom not only in your business but also from the business and because of the business. And of course, so that's sort of the background to the freedom framework itself.
And I know that that's your contention, that it's
That's my
expertise
contention.
based. And I have always disagreed with you. I don't believe the distinction exists between service based and product based companies, though the majority of businesses are service based or have a service overlay within their product environment. I believe this works within a product environment as openly as it does within a service environment, because ultimately those who deliver products are still experts in what they do and what they provide and the solutions they provide through products, whether it be products or services. And every product based company wants to attach services, every services company wants to have or productize their business in some degree. So I think they meet in the middle a little bit.
Sure. And I mean, there's a valid argument to say that, listen, it takes expertise to actually deliver products as well.
Absolutely.
I do not disagree with you. So while you've been disagreeing with me, I've not been disagreeing with you. I just keep alleging this.
Yeah, exactly. It's an allegation. It's.
That's what I do. What can I say? So if we look, let's go to the freedom framework. Okay, moving past this little thing.
Yeah.
Um, the first part of the freedom framework, there's 7 core pieces to the framework, and the first core is to rethink the core of the business. Okay, the core of the business has always been.
Before we do that, I do think it's really important that people understand the freedom framework also has like this sort of triangular shape to it, and the strongest geometrical shape in the world is a triangle. Right? This is an enduring, strong symbol, and I think this is really important for people to sort of to apply, because this symbol, I believe, is so structurally sound. This framework is so structurally sound that it applies to organizations of all sizes. So regardless of whether or not you are a smaller business, the corner store of your small town, or a city, you think you're a small fish in a big pond, or you're a big fish in a big pond, whatever it is, right? This framework can apply. So there's a lot of information here. Let's start there. That this strong structure applies regardless of the size, and I think we're going to get into that at the end of this conversation. But I think I want people to remember that as we go through. So
Well, it's interesting just that you say that because when you take a look at the triangles, there are 7 triangles in this model, and there's the middle triangle. Then there's an inner layer of 3 more elements that form, the 4 elements together form an inner triangle, and then it gets expanded to become an outer triangle. Now, I've softened the edges a little bit, you
a
know,
little bit.
but it's still a triangle. I mean, as far as that's concerned, it's a triangle with soft edges. So there you go.
Exactly.
So it's not too stark or harsh as far as that's concerned. But you're right. There are three triangles actively within the 7 that are there. And of course, the very, very middle one is to rethink the core of the business.
Yeah.
And
And what does that mean, Michael?
the core of the business traditionally has been your ability to generate a result that gives customers value or clients value while protecting your profit or giving you a profit. Because if you don't make a profit, you're not going to do it. If it doesn't give them value, they're not going to do it. So we've always had that as the core of the business. And the conduits to deliver that were the people and have been the people. And what I'm
And by
suggesting,
conduit, I think that's a gentle way of saying that
yeah, the mechanism
it's the
really,
mechanism. We use people
yes, the
to
cause and
deliver a
system.
profit, and to deliver value.
Yes.
And that's a traditional structure of an organization.
Yeah, it's certainly a traditional 20th century structure, because the minute you had assembly lines, people became cogs in a system. The system was larger than a single person. It's called comply or get out.
Correct.
And it's interesting because any structure that's been around for over 100 years, we think is the only one that's ever been. But there were management models before this. I mean, in fact, the most prevalent one in the 18th century was apprenticeship model, and medicine has held the apprenticeship model, through time, and so have many skilled trades. They've held an apprenticeship model rather than sort of a command and control. I'm the boss, you do as I say, because you need to conform to what the assembly line does, because the assembly line doesn't care, that kind of thing. So we think what we've been playing with is the owning model. It hasn't been the owning model. And the truth is that starting somewhere between the 1970s and 1990s, we outgrew the model anyway. Because when we're much higher in service-based businesses, people put up with the model. In product-based businesses, it never really worked great there either. But in service-based businesses, it just screams how much it doesn't work. When people are cogs in a system, they don't do well.
Absolutely.
They might endure it, but they don't do well.
So what does rethinking it mean?
Well, the fact is, in a service-based business, where the power sits is in the individual teams of knowledge workers. Because they're the ones that actually do it. So you can claim that they're a mechanism for the core, or you can treat them like the part of the core, because they really are part of the core. They're not just a mechanism for it. They're not there. This doesn't happen. There is no manager who can run the thing. It's the group of people working that part of the organization. And there's different teams for different parts of the organization, but it's the people in the team collectively who actually are the ones that generate the result. This sits as much with them as it does with the collective ability to generate a result. And as a result, you're in a situation where if you don't include that, people are voting with their feet these days. They just turn them in a different direction and they don't come back. Now, we know what that's like when a customer does that. And we can't control the customer. What you need to do is to be interesting enough so that the customer wants to give you their money and they have an expectation they'll get value. Well, it's just as true for the staff these days. You can't just compel the staff to do it. They have choices. Everybody has a choice these days. Technology with access to the internet, everybody sees a whole different world than they used to see. Okay. The other side of it is with generational differences, the latest two generations, millennials and Gen Z, or Z, depending on which side of the border you're on or which country you're in, they're not going to be anybody's conduit. They're not going to be anybody's cog in a system. They're like, I have a brain. I want to be able to use it. And if you don't have a place for me to be able to use my brain, I'll go to some place where they actually do respect me as an individual and allow me to participate. Now, the individual doesn't have the power, but collectively the team does. So the teams are part of the core. And if you don't accept it, you get a rude awakening. You never get the freedom you want.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Walking with your feet is just a click away now, too. Let's remember that in every business, they don't have to walk with their feet; they walk with a click, and that is a reality. So if you're not aware that that's happening, then this is even more important.
Yeah, so
you need to get to the idea that it's just their freedom from you is just a click away. So if that's the case, what are you going to do differently?
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that you need them. They no longer need you, because they'll find somebody else that they can participate with where they can get the levels of freedom that they want. And they've got the individual confidence to be able to do that. They've got the backing of their parents. It's interesting because I was talking to my daughter, I don't know, a couple months ago. She said this to me. We were talking about. She was telling me about one of her favorite albums or something. She was talking about the Doobie Brothers, and it was when I was in college, we used to listen to the Doobie Brothers and stuff, and she just picked it up and she really likes it, and she likes a lot of music that I've listened to. She likes a lot of music that her mom's listened to, and she said, "Dad, you got to remember, our generation likes our parents. You guys weren't the same, and I'm sitting there going back thinking, it's like, yeah, the first thing that any of us would do is it's like, how quickly can we go to university? Because that way we get out from the grip of our parents. They say that with millennials, they did studies on this, and 83% of all millennials said their number one hero was mom, and 82% of all millennials said their number two hero was dad. And they did previously in previous generations, they'd done the same thing with baby boomers, and they asked them, and 40% of all baby boomers said they'd be better off without parents. Very different world. So when
What a different world.
dad, I like my parents. It's like, oh, good, that's nice, and it's like, well, of course, but it's like it wasn't always that way with everybody. So,
Right.
so it's interesting to see. So they do have more of a voice. Your employees have more of a voice, and together they can create things that make a real difference. You have to let them. You have to, instead of treating them like a cog in a system, it's just strategically wise to build a system that includes them.
I love that. So if it's strategically wise to build a system that includes them, that's rethinking the core.
Yep.
And step 2 in the freedom framework is hiring smart, which is a logical next step, right?
Well, actually,
but you're going to step back a bit.
Of course I am. Here's the thing. There's 3 perspectives with rethinking the core. So the first one really is to consider your people a fundamental part of the business's core. Like if you don't adopt that, none of the rest of it works. Okay. The second, actually, that allows you to explore the notion of this thing called the intelligent ecosystem. Okay. Because I got to tell you, if you don't take that on, you're not going to have something that serves everybody. You can do lip service to rethinking the core, but you're not actually going to do it unless you literally learn how to develop this thing called the intelligent ecosystem. The second perspective of rethinking the core is really to understand how fundamental human behavior affects the inner workings of the business. Because everybody's got, they've got a biological need to survive. They've got an innate desire to thrive. We live with and through connections, and we have the ability to adapt to a changing environment. I mean, those are 4 of the many features of what it is to be human. And if you don't include those as part of rethinking the core, you just make assumptions, you're gonna be scratching your head a lot, and nothing's gonna work. Because you'd be amazed at how much those 4 little dynamics have a huge impact on how we all act as humans. Okay. And then the third perspective is the one we were alluding to before, which is that modern expectations have really fundamentally shifted. Okay. Technology, the internet's in people's pockets now, and those generational shifts, they've created new workplace expectations. So I can't go by the old ones. I could have pointed to the assembly line and it makes sense. Now there is no assembly line. It really is people thinking and interacting with each other. Okay. So what are the actions to take? What are the habits to develop, to build and maintain and grow this intelligent ecosystem? Frankly, that's the thing that you need, but it only works if you take the premise that the core fundamentally includes those teams of knowledge workers. Now I'm ready to move on.
Okay. So step 2,
yes,
logically, is hire smart.
Yeah, half the game is hiring. Okay. And one of the things that people run into, especially when people are voting with their feet, if they don't like it to be, is they find many owners are finding it more difficult to get good people on their teams. And a lot of times what people do then is they say, well, I'll get the best that I can. So they start to reduce the standard. And I'm saying, no, what I'd recommend you do is don't reduce the standard, you increase the standard. So the only people that you look at are people that have the potential to be partners or close allies. And those are the only ones that you actually consider. It changes how you look for your people. It changes what you expect from them. And that doesn't mean that you have to pay a fortune. I could actually hire a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old as opposed to a 48-year-old. Instead, it's not about the size of the paycheck. It is about the mindset. Okay, so it's more about mindset than the career stage. Because if I want somebody who is really interested in their professional growth. And I don't want somebody who looks at a job as to what they can get. I want somebody who looks at a job primarily for what they get to contribute. Now, you have to get the money right. Let's not kid ourselves. So I'm not saying don't get the money right or be cheap. What I'm saying is focus on the people who focus on something other than just the money. If they haven't really, if they're tapping that innate desire to thrive and they're looking for a career that allows them to do that and a place where they really can grow, professionally, that's the person I want. And so I call that type of person a potential partner or a close ally. So if you do that, you find that slowly but surely over a year or 2 year period, depending on how big an organization is, you're in a situation that you can actually have a complete about face on how your company operates. I'm talking about anybody under 200 people. Now, it works for people beyond it. It's just that it's more complex when you get to higher numbers of people as far as that's concerned. But so I'm talking about anything from 5 people to 200.
And here's the thing that I think a lot of people stumble on is this potential partner or close ally. You don't mean like tomorrow. And I think people hear that and they say, oh, but like then I don't want a partner. I don't want to now. But if you're not hiring for that kind of fit, then you're not hiring for duration. And this is the thing I think people just don't get. If you can't see a pathway this person could ever be a close ally or potential partner, then you're just putting a Band-Aid on a spot. Yeah. Like you're accepting something, you're lowering your standards.
And we all have people that show up, when we're hiring, that they just want a job. They just want to do the job, go home. Mm-hmm. And people go, well, there's nothing wrong with that. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to build an intelligent ecosystem, if you want to build an expertise-driven, services-based company, or an expertise-driven, any-based company.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna.
I understand. Okay, then you better look for people who are interested in growing their expertise. You better look for people who are interested in contributing to others. You better look for people who really see the gains in teamwork, not just the people who want to play solo.
Yeah. So with that idea that you need to look for people who are interested in collaborating, interested in growing their own skill set, interested in providing value, is that where train and grow people come in next? Or are you going to step back?
Let's put it this way. No, I'll go straight to there.
Oh, wow.
If I took a step back, that would be like more of the same. We have to change it up every now and then.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about that. If I'm only looking for people that are interested in professional growth, then either the implicit or explicit promise I make as I'm hiring is to have professional growth. And professional growth becomes the third part of the value exchange. You literally need to change the value exchange. So instead of just customer value and your profit, it's customer value, your profit, and professional growth. So all three now play. So you actually have a different core mandate.
But so this is the key part, because if you get this, you understand, okay, so profit fuels the company so that it continues to exist. Profit fuels, it satisfies and delights the ownership as well, but it ensures organizational sustainability.
Yes.
Value also ensures organizational sustainability by ensuring that clients are getting something out of their relationship with the organization. If they're not getting value out of the relationship with the organization, they're not relating to the organization anymore. They're finding somebody else who they're relating to. So now we've satisfied in a stakeholder environment, we're satisfying shareholders, right? Yep. Those who hold the company, owners. We're satisfying clients, because without them, the sun does not rise and set in the land of the organization.
Right.
Or it sets one final time. And then finally, we're satisfying the people by delivering them the value, in addition to, of course, just basic compensation, which is also table stakes, but we're also delivering to them what they want, because we're hiring smart, we're getting people who want to grow and learn, and we're giving them the opportunity to learn and grow in a way that's integrated with their work.
And that's where the social contract comes in, because remember, there's four things that the boss wants or the owners want, and there's four things the employee wants. And the owner, I mean, they want somebody that's capable of either already delivering at the individual contributor level, or they're ready to learn how to do it. You can get somebody straight out of school and you need to teach them, but the delivery at the individual level is the first thing you want. Second thing is you need people who are willing to work with each other in teams to generate a result that's larger than any single individual could generate on their own. The third thing comes from numbers 1 and 2, which is you want to build an environment where people feel like they have each other's back, and they actually feel like they can collaborate together in those teams. And of course, that leads to the fourth thing, which is progress towards the purpose. So that's what the owners or the boss wants. What the employee wants, first thing they want to be paid, obviously. Okay, compensation's for it. But the second thing they want is professional training and growth. They want professional growth. Okay, especially in an expertise-driven environment, they want growth. The third thing is they want access to meaningful work. And of course, if every job I'm doing supports my growth, I have access to meaningful work, because every job becomes meaningful because it supports my growth. And then, of course, the fourth thing they want, in addition to access to meaningful work, they want meaningful relationships. They need access to meaningful relationships. And in a collaborative environment, they can get that too. So it's number 2 on each side. So it's the ability to collaborate to generate a result from the owner side, and the professional growth on the employee side. That is where the synergy of an ecosystem actually works really, really well.
And I want to, expertise-driven environment does not necessarily, for people listening, does not necessarily mean sitting in an office doing work in an office. That's not what you're saying, because expertise driven and someone has a plumbing business that they're listening to, electricians, service technicians, whatever it is, people in the field. This is an expertise driven environment.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, just think about it, if they're not upgrading their skills and expertise every single day, one day a code change comes in and everybody's out of date. Yep. So you've got to be updating all the time. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. And this is why I say these triangles are so important. These are the foundational elements of the framework, is all shaped in triangles, strongest structure around, and it applies everywhere. And this is why I think this is so important. Anything else we need to go over in train and grow your people?
Yeah, one of the key pieces here that a lot of business owners that we work with treat as their secret weapon is the career development growth plan. Because if I can overlay the career development growth plan for somebody, and I can actually operate from their own individual growth plan using the job components as the fodder to help them get their growth, I'm now focused on their win. And we're getting the job done concurrently. And they know that the job's getting done. Nobody's hoodwinking anybody, but the truth is they know they're there to do a job, and that's what they get their comp from. But they also are interested in having their professional growth occur as well. So by integrating those two, instead of having them be two disparate things, which actually takes too much time, by integrating them together, I'm in a situation where it doesn't take any more time, and the people actually get their professional growth done in a way that also enhances how the job is done. Everybody wins without taking the excess time, because in a small to medium-sized business, there's too much to do and not enough of you to go around. And so if we can integrate things so that it really works stronger, then that's actually critical as far as that's concerned. So, and that's probably the hardest part to implement initially. But I got to tell you, it's one of the most lucrative elements to integrate. Somebody actually takes this on over a course of a 3 to 6 month period. Within a year, you have an incredibly different work team or series of teams.
Yeah, and this is a very intense step. We go over it in the Train and Grow People segment earlier on. Go back and re-listen to it, because there are 10 great questions here. Once we finished that, we go to we shift our focus from individual people to teams. Yes. Shifting that focus is important. Why?
Well, the individual work is important, but I got to tell you, most companies work with more than one person to deliver results for their clients. And it's the individual teams of knowledge workers that collectively generate the result. It's not any single individual. So we're taught how to generate a result. What we're not taught is how to work with each other to generate collective results. And that's the one that if there's one that breaks down, that's one that breaks down. And especially in a smaller business, and I say anything under a couple of hundred people, you're in a situation where everybody's scrambling around. You got 120 people, you're scrambling around making sure you deliver on the client deliverables, and everybody's focused on the client deliverables. They're not focused on how well are we working as a team. The only places where you see that you consistently see people working together as a team are either in things like professional sports. You see that all the time, or when it's life and death. So fire departments spend a lot of time on teamwork. Military spends a ton of time on teamwork. Police departments, the ones that work really well, spend a lot of time on teamwork. And if you go beyond a normal police department, you go to things like the Navy SEALs, okay, or SWAT teams, or teams where life and death situations are there. They spend the time actually really, really learning how to work with each other because it's life and death on the line. So anytime it really matters, that's there. Now, you also will see it, for example, in entertainment. I've seen people who are actors in plays, actors on Broadway, you see that. They spend a lot of time learning the cadence of how to work with each other. Even when people
But that's so important. Like, let's not skip past this because they do that by practicing it over and over and over and over about it. And they have really, really strict discipline around the structure of how they practice that, because the practice leads to when you perform. How they practice in private so they can perform in public. And my daughter is a competitive dancer, and my two sons, they don't dance, so they don't relate to it necessarily in the same way. They've always appreciated it,
Right.
and appreciate all the work that she puts into it. But the way I look at it is I tell people that she practices 30 hours a week every single week to perform 4 times.
Right.
That's their competition. So imagine hockey players, if you had practices 30 hours each week for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you had 4 games. That's the ratio in competitive dance. But that's a useful way of thinking about this, isn't it? Focusing on
Well,
teams is rehearsal.
well, it's interesting because at work, people think, well, we don't have time. We're too busy delivering.
Right.
You'd be amazed at how much time you have. It could be as simple as actually planning it at the start and getting everybody on the same page when you're taking on a thing, and you talk about who's going to do what where. And then at the end of it, debriefing it. And the time you spend debriefing how it went, or you debrief each phase as you go so that you're learning along the way. It doesn't have to be, well, sorry, I can't do your project till 2 weeks from now because we're busy for the next week and a half practicing how to do your project. It's not how it goes.
No.
But I got to tell you, there is so much wasted time in just about every single corporation that exists that I promise you there's time to actually do the thinking piece. And actually, the thinking piece and the feedback improves the effectiveness of the team so much that if you can orient around teamwork, it changes which structures you use as you grow, because you're always going to outstrip your structures. The key is, how do I actually, what decides? If it's all based on individual teams, I'm going to actually have individual structures. But if my people actually need to deliver in teamwork to get the larger results for our firm, then I better treat that as a structure, right? That is an element that's critical so that I can actually identify structures that'll support the team, not just one individual at a time.
And that's super important now because the speed of strategy, the speed of technology is such that if we're not learning, solving, and adjusting, if we're not doing this more intentionally, more quickly within our teams, if we're not teaching how to collaborate, refining, better yet, how to collaborate by figuring out what worked, figuring out what didn't work, solve one thing, do it again, do it again. If that's not what we're doing, and if we're not documenting that learning and transmitting that learning across the organization, we are falling behind very quickly today.
Now, there's another dimension to this too, and that's that as a company grows, because there's the people aspect just sort of gets really hairy. It's like all the issues multiply. People tend to lose sight of how to make the work results focused And that what they do is they start morphing and shifting to a competency-based model. They say, well, there's too many people and they're moving back and forth with different teams. So as a result, I can't possibly use teams as my model. So we'll use departments or we'll use something else. And I'll just say everybody at this level needs these 7 skills to go to the next level. And what happens is that, and that's effectively a competency framework. So what happens is that people start to focus on the competencies rather than the results, because the competencies are what they get paid for. Now, they do the best they can to generate the results, obviously, and where they focus what is on what they get paid for. And if they get paid to improve their competencies, I promise that becomes a much bigger conversation than actually maximizing the result for the client. They'll get by to get it done, and they'll spend their extra time on the competencies, even if they're not competencies that actually give them energy. If there's things that suck the life out of them, chances are good that I'm actually not even getting my money's worth anyway. As an owner, if I'm getting people to do more of what they're mediocre at so that they can tick a box and get more money.
Yeah, but here's the other part of that. We're taught not to cheat, right? Like you talk about this idea. Yeah. We're taught not to cheat. And then that's what it means in school. Cheating is relying on somebody else to do the work that you're not good at. But in a team, that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, if you want to build teams of complementary strengths, if you got me doing stuff that I'm no good at, that's just a waste of money for everybody.
Yeah.
So in a corporate environment, teamwork is critical as far as that side is concerned, So if you can maintain the focus on client value, you can actually have this thing that actually works when you're really small. The team's generating results. What happens is it's really hard to measure people's performance. Well, there's ways to do that. And there was a couple that I introduced in the book. One is if you combine project-based teams with what I call a homeroom environment, where you've actually got somebody there's people you see in homeroom, they always took attendance in high school. Okay. And then people go off to their various classes. But at the same, and you also do announcements and stuff. But if you actually have a centralized place that's separate from the team, the project-based teams themselves, to keep an eye on and support the growth of the people, you can actually still measure the effectiveness of each person and support them in their growth and development as far as that's concerned, especially when you're overlaying the job with their actual growth plan. So that's one way, is what I call a hybrid approach, or a hybrid with a homeroom approach. Another one is just to actually set up a mentoring program per se and supporting people through that. And there's a bunch of others that people can do as well. But those are just 2 examples of how I can actually maintain a team focus rather than go to a competency model. Because the minute I start to go to a competency model, I start to take out the edges of what makes unique people unique. And it's those unique pieces that actually give us our magic. If I take those out, I'm in a situation where the minute people become interchangeable, I've lost the X factor. And the X factor is the uniqueness that each person brings that actually makes something magic. So that's what's at risk if you don't learn how to play with teams. But if you can learn how to play with teams and how to grow the teams, you actually can build an overall organization based on teams, even if they are forming and reforming. There's ways to do it.
Yeah. And I think again, if you're thinking about it, you have a shot. If you're not, and that's the important thing here. If you're thinking about it, you have a shot. If you're not even thinking about refocusing on teams, if you're not even thinking about how to do those kinds of things, that's where the challenge is. And that's step 4, right? But in order for teams to work, teams need coordination. Teams need some general coaching and support that comes from their managers. Yes. So within teams, you have managers. So if you're focusing on teams, the managers are really important to that group, right? So you have to grow managers. That's step 5.
Right. And of course, before we go to step 5, we have to take a step back to step 4, because you brought up an incredibly important point when you talked about triangles. And so what you want to notice is, for anybody who's seen the diagram, and if you haven't seen the diagram and you want to see the diagram, we have a URL, it's freedombookresources.com, and it points straight to the resources there. And we've got that diagram in there. And the diagram, there's the middle triangle, which is rethink the core, but then there's another that forms the center of a triangle that's rethink the core, hire smart, train grow your people, and focus on teams. So it's the work with the individual people and their teams is the middle triangle. And then as we go to grow managers, okay, that's one of three elements that we add to this, which makes a larger, which includes both internally and externally. So we've got both elements at play there. And I couldn't step past that one.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's another visual that I want to draw as we go through this because I think it's really well designed. But let's talk about managers first,
Okay.
because I'm going to do that with the final triangle. So, grow managers. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So, especially when a company is small, what happens is people get into management because they're the best ones at doing generating individual contributor results. Okay, so they're the best at actually generating results themselves. The boss trusts them more, and that they said is you can take care of my other people or our other people because I trust you more. And so what happens is they actually figure, well, I know what I'm doing. My system works. So really, to be an effective manager, all I have to do is tell them what I'm doing and get them to do that, and they should be fine. Except everybody has a unique way of doing things, and of course, the problems are far more complex these days than they ever have been because you're dealing with, unexpected things. The complexity is huge. Technology is actually, I mean, it's great and it's wonderful and it's complexified our business. How do you navigate your way through a bunch of unknowns? And that's why the power of the team actually works so well. Yet, managers are probably the least qualified to actually do the role that they're in. They're usually not trained as well as they need to be. They're chosen to be in management based on their individual contributor experience, not based on their ability to manage. And they're not given the support when they're there to really take this to a different level. Okay. And one of the things that managers, one of the traps they fall into is they fall into using prescribed power. I'm the boss, you're the employee, you need to listen to me. That was fine in the 20th, it wasn't even fine in the 20th century, but it was what was used in the 20th century. But the fact is that it doesn't work in the 21st century almost at all. People will put up with it, but I got to tell you, they got one foot out the door and they're watching. And then you wonder why your turnover is high. Your staff turnover is higher than it needs to be. But the managers everybody loves are the ones that actually use power of influence, not prescribed power. In other words, instead of power of position, I'm using the power based on the credibility I've earned, based on the things that I've shared and the support that I provide actually is useful to people, and they can tell that I really care about their best interests, not just treating them as a cog in a system. So that shift is there. Now there's a bunch of stuff in the book around that, and there's things we talked about in terms of the podcasts. In fact, we had 2 full episodes just on managers alone. So rather than sort of spouting that again, I just direct people there.
Yeah, I think that's it is a really deep subject. I think the thing that we don't want to do is just as we go through this part is just slough over the fact that this is the part that probably is one of the harder pivots along the way.
Yes.
Because the manager job has been conflated with leadership job, and those are very different jobs with very different purposes, and you distinguish between the two. And I'm also just going to say one of the things I love most about the Freedom Framework is it focuses on the hard parts of what's coming next more than other similar frameworks in the space, because it really is about execution, and execution is not sexy. And I think that we don't support managers appropriately in understanding their role, and we also don't support leaders appropriately in supporting the role as it relates to execution. We're really great about pie in the sky stuff, but not about execution. And as we make that move from managers to leaders now, let's talk about the difference between those two.
Sure. But
What is the difference?
I was just going to say, do you know what the most important part of management is? Biggest single part, building and developing trust-based relationships. If
Okay.
we trust each other, we can work together, and I can support you to grow your career, and you will support, the people on the team will support each other to get the collective result that we're all in for. That's the only way an intelligent ecosystem works.
Hmm.
Command and control doesn't, and it erodes trust, and it's just horrible, frankly. Whereas building these trust-based relationships, except don't we need to get a result? And this doesn't seem to be lining up and seem to be meshing. And so this is one aspect of where leadership, in my opinion, is important. And as you know, I didn't go through all the different aspects of leadership. There are so many dimensions of leadership that you could go to. I didn't go to most of them. What I said is, if you take a look at what a leader's job, they're to create and unfold a compelling future. They stand for the activities that strengthen the corporate culture, all that kind of stuff. But there's a couple of things: supporting managers in developing their teams and each of their team members is a critical part of leadership, supporting those managers because they need to learn how to do this. And the second thing is developing and growing existing and future leaders within the company, many of whom come from the management ranks. So it's not just helping managers to actually support their teams and support their individual members and help them grow. It's also developing these people so that they become the future leaders of the organization. And it's about causing leadership through others. So those are the two pieces, in fact, that I focused on, because those are the two pieces that everybody overlooks. Like you said, you say execution, I say implementation. When I go around with execution, I think of a novel series.
You think about violence.
It's all about assassins, right?
We're talking about non-violent execution here. We're talking about non-violent execution.
Non-violent execution. Okay, so you use poison instead of a gun, I guess. But implementation for sure, and we agree on.
But we really taught. I think that there's just so much out there about leaders that are focused on the future, vision, mission, understanding the values, implementing the values, building culture. There's so much there, and yes,
and it's important.
In Paper Napkin, we spend a lot of time there because it's so super important, and people also have a hard time taking that and then superimposing, I'll use your word, implementation over top of it, because the supporting managers, and here's the important one, supporting managers in developing their teams and people is so important, because if you're not doing that, the leader never gets any freedom at all, ever. Right. If you can't support your managers in developing their people and their teams, then you're doing it. And if you're doing it, you have no freedom.
Well, that's part of it. The other part of it is that you're growing dependencies on you. So you're locking yourself in. You're actually tying yourself more and more and more as you go. And the other side.
So let's stop there for a second. You're either growing your managers or you're growing dependencies on you. That's the choice.
Correct. And people think, yeah, but they just want an answer. I'll just give them an answer. Okay, so grow the dependency on you.
So next time. And there's the spoiler. There's the spoiler. Instead of giving them answers, what do you give them?
Observations and the opportunity to think it through. You see, the thing when you talk about supporting managers in their development of their teams and their team members or their people, and when you talk about developing and growing managers as leaders, you can do this. You see, this is another one of those things that becomes integrated, because how I support managers with their people is the same way as how I develop them. Because if I tell them something, it was my idea. So even if they implement it, it was my idea. I'm a leader, they're a follower. So what I'm doing is growing a follower. Whereas if I say, well, that's a great question, and what are your thoughts about that? And they're like, well, I just want the answer. Okay, so I got that you just want the answer. And what we've talked about is your growth as a future leader. So you know that if I just give you an answer, I'm actually getting in your way of growing as a future leader, because the biggest thing that I can contribute to you is access to the thinking you're going to need so that you can make these decisions for yourself. Because if you can't make the decisions for yourself, I'm now forever tied to you, and I may retire at some point. At some point in life, I suspect I may die. You can't just latch on to me forever. It's not going to serve you. So the key is if I can see leaders' job is to support the thinking of their people. Their people's job, the manager's job is to support the people in generating the results. Now they don't generate the results, they support the people to generate the results. And then the manager does that through sort of a collaborative approach where they actually encourage the independent thinking of their people and they actually trust them to work together with each other to figure it out. The leader's job is really to support the manager in how they think. It's not about the right answer, it's how they think. It's almost like, doesn't matter if you get the answer right or wrong, it's how you got there. Well, okay, and I've seen a lot of people tease, third grade math teachers, because they're saying, well, it matters how you got there as opposed to whether you got it right or not. Well, here's the thing. If you don't have a methodology that gets you there, you're never going to get the right answer on a sustainable basis anyway. So I could dictate a process, or I could let you discover the one that works best for you and work with your model of the world and support you on how to really fine tune and hone that so that you can be more effective in leaders in your style as you grow, and you can actually support your people's independent thought as well. So the way to do that is with just observations and questions. So I may make an observation. I could be very blunt about, you know what, I smell trouble if you just did that. Now, I'm not going to ask a question that leads them to the answer I want, because that's just a statement with a question mark at the end. What I need them to do is to think through possibilities and really explore, how they're going to deal with this, because that's actually what would give them the biggest gift, even though it's harder in the short term.
Yeah, and you know what I really think is significant here is, again, if we're now on the outer triangles, right? So 5 is grow managers in the bottom right triangle, 6 is the bottom left triangle, and this visual is really important. So you can grab the paper napkin or you can go to the website, as Michael talked about earlier on. But these are guidelines, right? So I really believe that the leader's job is to provide guided discovery for your team and facilitate their learning. And I almost always see this, and I'm sure you would agree with this, when you interject, when you actually introduce real leadership into an organization, the team kind of rebels a little bit, and they're like, but I wanted to know how to do this. And they kind of push back because they're used to you providing them the answer, versus they're used to the dependency, and they sort of scream for it because it was the easier way for them in that moment. But once they get this, it's far more empowering, it's far more scalable, and all the freedom starts here, right?
Right. And so do you know where that comes from?
What? I said a lot. I used more than one word.
The notion that people just want the boss to give them the answer. See, our brains are designed to, it's part of our survive, thrive notions. Our brains are designed to conserve energy. So if there's an easy way to do it, we will divert to the easier way to do it. There's nothing personal about it. It's not like people are lazy. It's just that that's part of our survival, is to find the easiest way to do something so that we can keep our brains free and available for either to protect ourselves from a future threat or to actually step into thriving as far as that side of it's concerned. So it's a perfectly natural, normal part of human biology. And there are parts of human biology when you're not in life and death situations that don't serve us. They keep us alive, but they don't actually give us access to move forward. This is an exact example of one. That's why the power of habit is so important. And it's interesting because I may have one set of habits that I've gotten, and if the habit is to get the information from the boss, I need to actually develop a different habit that allows me to be more self-reliant and allows me to actually support people at a different level without, again, giving them the answers. Because like you said, that increased dependency will reduce my freedom, or their freedom in that case too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've gone through these 6 steps: rethink the core, hire smart, train and grow people, focus on teams, grow managers, develop leaders. And number 7 in the framework is prepare for unexpected change. Now, there's a key word in prepare, and it's not plan for, it's prepare for. Why the distinction?
Okay, so I would actually use plan and prepare similarly. The difference that for me would be that prepare for allows for a much wider variety of what could happen than plan for. Plan is usually more specific. And the one that I would say is completely different from those two would be predict unexpected change, because you can't. Plan for it, yeah, but you don't know what kind of unexpected change it's going to be. So you first of all, you can't predict it. Second of all, planning for it would be difficult because you don't know how specifically it's going to show up. But you could prepare for it, which means, see, if I prepare for a rainy day, I'm setting money aside to prepare for a rainy day. Or if I prepare for a long trip, I might actually put a first aid kit in my car. I'm not anticipating needing the first aid kit. And that's part of preparation, but it's not part of the plan. I'm not planning on getting hurt. So that's the difference. Is planning is more specific, preparing is more building in. Okay, let me just say it a different way. Success in real estate is easy if you have staying power. Success in real estate is not easy at all if you don't have staying power. Markets do go up, markets do go down. And if I don't have staying power, if I can't withstand shocks to the system, then I will not do well in real estate. If I can withstand them because I've actually built myself whatever the preparations require, then I'm in a situation where I'm okay. Preparing for unexpected changes in babysitting routines for parents with small children would be to have 3 or 4 or 5 different babysitters available, not one. Planning for one might be, picking one and then setting it up with a second in case the first goes. Well, I'm not going to sit there and set it up. I just want to make sure that I have the resources so that, my wife and I can go out if our children, and without worrying about our children. So that's the difference.
Okay. So I love this idea of distinguishing between predict and prepare. To me, the difference between planning and preparing is even more nuanced around what we discussed when we talked about this, because you were really talking about the consequences of unexpected growth more than the steps that lead to unexpected change, right? Like it's not planning through the steps that relate to unexpected change. It's planning for the consequences that could result of it. And that, to me, was the preparation.
Well, and the reason I drew that distinction is I can't predict unexpected change.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. The truth is, I don't. Otherwise, why would I call it unexpected change? It's not unexpected change. If I could actually, predict it, I can't. It's not unexpected. However, regardless of whether it's expected or not, I can prepare for the possible outcomes, because the outcomes are really only fit into one of 3 buckets. Now, there's variations on a theme, but either I'm better off, I'm shifted but no better or no worse, or I'm actually potentially worse off. And so there's only 3 things to prepare for, and I don't know which is going to happen, so I'm not going to plan for it. I'm not going to plan to be worse off. I'm not going to plan to have a bunch of change that doesn't actually move me forward. And I'm certainly don't know what to plan for when it comes to the magnitude of unexpected upside. So, but I can prepare for those things, and I may not be fully prepared, but at least I'm further ahead than I was before. And the reason that this becomes critical as part of the freedom framework is there are many habits that I will be working on to actually evolve hiring smart and training my people and growing them and integrating the growth plan with the job role and working on team goals, not just individual goals, and growing, my managers and developing leaders throughout the organization. So when I'm doing all those things, there's a lot of different shifts that are going to need to happen in my business. And that may take me 1 to 2 years of actual habit development and habit shifting. Because what got me there as an individual contributor, for example, is not the same set of habits that's going to get me there as an effective manager. And so there are new habits. However, unexpected changes will derail anything I'm up to, including that habit development. So I could talk all I want about how great these steps are, except if I get a 30% increase in revenues that gets dropped into my lap, as the two great contracts, I'm in a situation where all my plans for habit development get set aside because guess what? That's what we're in business for, is to help clients. And if we can do it in an increased way, we tend to go for that rather than actually saying, no, I'm going to pass on that and actually build these habits, because we don't know that that'll come back again. And if you say no once, they may not come back. So preparing for it in slow, measured way allows for me to build enough staying power to withstand changes that I didn't anticipate, that either leave me better off, the same, or worse off.
Yeah, and I think that this is such an important thing, and we go into really great depth about this subject.
Yes.
But the idea of preparation now, so someone listening is going to say, well, no, I got to prepare differently for each one of those outcomes, being better off, the same, or worse off. So the preparation is completely different. What would you say to that person?
I would say you're absolutely right. The preparation is completely different. When you're looking at something that potentially you're better off, there's two things you need to focus on. You need to focus on the depth and breadth of your human resources, the people you have available to you. And you need to make sure that you have excess cash in reserve to take advantage of those things. So that's one set. Now, if things are the same, only different, there's two different things you need to focus on. You need to make sure that you've got enough cash to actually support you, and you got to make sure that your human resources are in line and that you've actually got the extra wiggle room with regards to the human resources or the people. And then if you go to some place where potentially you're worse off, there's two things you need to focus on there. And so in that instance, you need to make sure that you've got the depth and cross training and breadth of your people, your human resources, and you have to make sure that you've got a strong enough reserve to help you gain the staying power through it. So you definitely use two different tools. They just look eerily similar. And you can actually morph them in different ways, so that if I'm actually growing the depth and breadth of my people and my access to contractors, or keeping friendly with competitors in case I need to subcontract, or making sure my people are cross-trained, or any number of things to actually make sure that I've got a stronger base, or even if it's adding an extra half person or person over and above what would have me at full capacity, any of those things can work. Now, will I use them the same if I'm better, same, or worse? No, I'll use it differently. However, it's the same activity of building the reserve of human resources that actually can be used in all three. So tongue-in-cheek aside, it really is the same in terms of the human resources. Now, when it comes to the money, on the other hand, it's the same as well. I mean, if I have more money, I can tap opportunities. If I have more money, I can actually deal with changes that don't leave me necessarily better off, but they also don't leave me worse off. And if I have the additional financial resources, I can actually protect myself and generate staying power through anything that, an economic downturn or other things, other shocks that are negative to me, as far as that's concerned. So those two elements handle all three of those keys. And if you just focus at the consequence of change, of unexpected change, your efforts there, you don't know how they're going to be used. And you're absolutely right. They would be used differently in those three things, but the same tools get used in all three scenarios. So it's actually a little easier than people fear. And it takes consistent effort. But I don't have to do it all overnight. I can actually take steps to just quietly grow my base of contractors, my base of allies. I can actually make sure that I'm staying friendly with competitors whose ethics I admire, and I can make sure that I've got a little bit of extra wiggle room in my own staffing, so that I've got the extra bandwidth to cross train people, and I've also got the extra room in case I need it, based on either an upside or a downside or a shift across. And the same with money. If I start putting a little bit away, you know what, it adds up over time.
Yeah, it doesn't take long for that to add up.
Nope.
Look, I get it. As you prepare for unexpected change, for things to get worse, things to get better, for things to stay the same. Get that. Now, we've got these 7 pieces of the freedom framework, and we started off talking about, the hidden danger zones that lurk underneath a company. And that's what got us into this whole conversation to begin with. And this is why I think you did this work, right? I mean, I think you did this work because over 30 years, you've been working with organizations, you've seen these patterns evolve time and time again. And oh, by the way, these outstripping of structures reoccur at various stages as a company grows. So how 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 do I relate the seven things to the danger zones? Do they all relate in the same way to every one of the danger zones? What should I do with
Well,
that?
depending on the stage of growth you're at in your business, you'll use each of them differently. If I need 10 new people, hiring smart becomes a very high priority. If I need one person, I still need to know how to hire smart, but I'm not going to, put the resources to 10. All seven apply right across the danger zones. Okay. Now, remember, so I know you'd be disappointed if I didn't do this, but let's take a step back. Okay.
Shocking.
I know. And so when we take a step back, the question is, okay, so what is it about these danger zones anyway? So remember, business owners are pretty savvy. You know, if we can see a problem, we can deal with it. If we can't see a problem, but we know it exists, we can deal with it.
Mhm.
The ones that get us are the ones where we can't see the problem. We don't even know it exists. We see some symptoms. We have no idea that those symptoms relate, or relate at all to these underlying issues that are occurring. And because the underlying issues don't show their head. So what happens is all we know is that we're stuck and we can't quite figure out why. And if we can't quite figure out why, we will actually misdiagnose and start fixing the wrong problem. So identifying the danger zones when you see a collection of issues or symptoms that can get in our way, you're in a situation where by identifying those, to look for what's beneath it. And so what we've done is we've said, listen, there's two things that are beneath that. One is that as a business grows, you will outstrip your structures. There are structures designed to make it easier for your people to bring their best, easier for you to generate the types of results you want for your clients, easier for you to protect your profit, easier for you to grow them. And as you grow, those structures don't work as well. I got off a phone call this morning. There was a physician. He's part of an 8-person surgeons co-op, basically. There was 3 guys that got a building, and they and they said, well, we're going to split costs and we're going to share staff and we're just going to make it well, and we can each be our, surgeons as we go. And that's fine. And eventually there was somebody else that came in and somebody else that came in, and now they're up to 8. And the problem is the same structures that they used originally for the 3 no longer work for the 8. And they're like, well, we're physicians and this is really like, we're just sort of a sharing arrangement. So, I know you talk about businesses and business growth, but that probably doesn't apply to us. And I'm like, it sounds exactly like everybody else who we're dealing with. You outstrip your structures, and as a result, things stop working.
Yeah.
So this applies everywhere as far as that's concerned. So, understanding that no matter which danger zone you're in, you're going to outstrip your structures. And when you outstrip your structures, it's the second piece that really gets you, understanding the impact on the people and what people's likely behaviors are going to be. Because if you can understand certain aspects of human behavior, you can actually start predicting behavior, because behavior is predictable. Now, to the person, to the extent, or can you actually see what are some of the tendencies that people have? Well, if I know that those are tendencies people have, the key is, okay, when I'm tired, my golf game is horrible. Okay. Like I went to Mexico with a couple of buddies a couple of years ago, and they wanted to go golfing. These are guys that golf 2 rounds, a day for a whole week, as far as that's concerned. I'm like, sure. It was down in Mexico. They had caddies. They had all this stuff sorted out. And I was exhausted at the time. And so I went out with them. And I think the first round with them it's like 110. And so I didn't even bother with the second round. And I told those guys, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you for dinners for the next 2 or 3 days. I'm not gonna golf. And they're like, huh. Well, look at you, that sort of. So what did I do? I walked along the beach, I relaxed, I slept in, I read fiction, and I enjoyed them for dinner, and we ended up having good conversations and all that stuff. That was fine. And then after doing that, I think for 3 days, so that was days 2, 3, and 4, day 5, I went back And I played golf again with them. And I shot a 92. Well, that's 18 shots better than the 110 I did on day one. And that's the equivalent, like that's dropping a shot a hole, and not like just about it. It's exactly a shot a hole I dropped. Nothing magical happened with my golf game. It's not like I learned new techniques in the 3 days I was off. What happened was I just got a little bit of rest. So my body works a little bit better. And as a result, actually got more into the groove of the game. And I'll never be like this amazing, great golfer. I just don't get out there enough. But I got to tell you, if I'm playing bogey golf, and 92 was within 2 shots of playing bogey golf, I was pretty happy with my round.
Bogey golf's a great target
Oh,
for me.
but I got to tell you, it was because I was rested. It was, the structure that was missing was that I was tired. Well, you misread stuff, you get in trouble. If I had tried to start fixing my game, I would have been in real trouble because, frankly, that's not where the problem was.
So let's talk about this danger zones then. If we're revisiting the danger zones and we're thinking about how I apply the framework to the danger zones, and all of them could apply, do I apply them in order?
Well, as opposed to worrying about which framework piece applies to which danger zone, it's more useful, in my opinion, to look and say, with each danger zone, what are the structures you're outstripping that need to be addressed? Because if I see which structures I'm outstripping, then I can just pick and choose the right danger zones.
But how do I know which structures I'm outstripping?
I'm going to tell you.
Well, why don't you just tell me?
Let's do that. Okay, so in danger zone 1, as I'm approaching $2 million in revenue, or 2 million pounds, or 2 million, whichever, or in some cases 3 million, because if I've got larger project teams, there's certain aspects of management that I figured out. Remember, everything up to about $1 million, I was hiring utility players because I need people that can do everything. I don't have enough depth in my resources to actually have a series of specialists. But once I start moving past $1 million and I head towards 2, I now need to actually start looking at specialists, and I need to look at people who are capable of supporting other people from a management perspective, because I do need one or more managers, 1 or 2 perhaps managers, to actually support these people. But I need to look at not just who's the technically strongest, I need to look at who can actually support other people. So the thing that I'm going to look at, the biggest single thing I'm going to look at, who's actually capable of supporting others as far as that's concerned. And so, and I'm also going to start experimenting with specialists. Even though they cost more, it doesn't matter because I'm big enough that I can actually tap that, with them, or, with regards to that. So those are probably the 2 biggest things that I look at with regards to that side. In addition of, as I outstrip the structures, I always am going to look at, instead of what are structures that would constrain people, because if I get spread too thin, I'll try to get people to do things the way I need them to. If I look from the perspective of how do I support them to be at their best? I mean, I'm always going to be, there is no time when it's too soon to bring in the growth plan, for example. So, I mean, literally, just about every single tool here can apply as soon as you can, as far as that's concerned. At between 1 and 2 million, I don't need a bunch of leaders in addition to managers. So that's a between 5 and 10 million thing, but it's somewhere, danger zone 2 or 3 for sure. So, but other than that, it's like everything else, really does play. But the specific structures I'm looking at are the ones in terms of spread my wings a little bit, start to grow specialists, and also looking at people that have got management potential. In other words, that they're actually capable of supporting people to be at their best rather than something else. Now, in danger zone 2, when I get on the other side of 5 million, again, I need to be squarely focused on what will support people to be at their best, because I've got more teams now, and that's where I might see some quality problems. I might see some inconsistencies between the teams, things like that. I also,
and the danger there also with the inconsistencies within teams is people tend to step backwards towards control in those inconsistencies,
right,
as opposed to stepping forward into learning how to focus on teams and growing the team towards understanding how to, build results. understanding to have proper conversations around what the results are, what the practice is, how do we get better, that kind of thing.
Well, it's also how you see your people. Okay. We've all been on a plane where you've had a child who's crying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People who have no relationship with the child and maybe who haven't had kids in a while, they'll go, would you shut that kid up? Somebody got to soothe her, stick the thing in the kid's mouth or something like that. Or if you have a child that's fussy or that has an exploding diaper or whatever, pick your thing. Okay. Somebody who's not related to the child, not all the time, but sometimes you'll get somebody to go, will you take care of that kid? So there's a lack of compassion. In other words, I'm focused on what I need. I'm not focused on what's there. The mom of that little child, will go, you poor thing. So they're actually looking to the benefit and the welfare of the child. Now, not every other passenger isn't. Some passengers are like, oh, kid's having a rough day, or whatever they say. So the question is, where am I focused? When I'm getting past 5, it's like I need them to conform because I need my numbers. Or I can say, wow, they're struggling. How do we need to support them? You see, and if you haven't got the growth plans in place, you need them in place. Like you better be getting them in place as quickly as you can if you're already north of 5 and hitting that. The other thing is, what are the structural impediments that are getting in your way? How well are you supporting the managers and the teams with getting real feedback on the fiscal aspects of the work, but also the technical aspects and how easy the human aspects as well as the sustainability aspect, which is the 4 dimensions of results that we talked about. So, checking on those things, increased training on teamwork is critical once you get into danger zone 2, because now you're already north of 5 million. I promise you, if you haven't got that there, you got a real problem because you're increasing the number of teams. So the more, again, there's a piece of advice I heard once, and this was when I had we had an English Mastiff. Okay, now
Mm-hmm.
this dog was 5 pounds when it was born. Okay, we now live in an area in Vancouver where it's quite routine to see dogs that are between 3 and 4 pounds, fully grown. This dog was born at 5 pounds. We picked him up from the breeder at 11 weeks, and he was 32 pounds. I had a BMW little 328 at the time. We traded it in, got a Volvo station wagon, it's got the big grill that goes down the back. And they said, oh, you're gonna put a kennel in the back. I'm like, no, the back is the kennel. Literally at 6 months, he was 110 pounds, and at 2 years, he was 220.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking big dog. What I was told is train a dog before it gains weight. And the second best time to train any dog is now. First time may have been back before, the second time is now. So if I'm already at 5 million or just after 5 million, I make sure that I'm actually doing the work I have to have the teams work better together. Because no matter how many I have, if I plan on any continued growth, then I better be really good at that part, because people need to know how to work well together, because I can actually use teams as part of the growth is. It's also a good time to start your financial reserves. By the time you're at 5 million in revenues, you should be able to start setting aside a little bit of money. And as you're growing people, you really also are looking to say, how do I keep looking for people, and building the connections in the marketplace so that I don't get caught short if I have a sudden opportunity or if I have a sudden change that's there. So the elements of preparing for unexpected change start coming in. And those are probably the biggest ones at danger zone 2. And it's interesting, if I go to danger zone 3, okay, training and growing people has got to be like right up there, to the extent it wasn't already there at 2. At 3, it's critical. It becomes critical. It's one of the biggest reasons why people stumble and never get to 10 million. You were going to say something, I could tell.
I was going to say something. One of the things I want to say how important it is about this part. We talked about training the dog. Part of training the dog is training the trainer, like train the owner, right? I mean, dog training is owner training more than dog training.
That's only about 95% of it.
Yeah, only about 95%.
Yeah.
So
like literally.
let's also refocus. The reason why I say that is let's refocus when we're thinking about danger zone 2 and 3, and we're talking about what the first step is. Well, leadership and ownership have to get on the framework, have to get comfortable, because that's step 1. And
And
then,
it's not getting on the framework for the benefit of others. It's like, if I'm not growing and I'm an owner, nothing's going to happen. Like,
yeah,
I
you
didn't talk about
cannot,
that in the book, but nothing happens. If the owner's unwilling to grow, none of this works. None of it matters. Don't bother.
and not grow financially. Every owner of a business wants their financial to grow, right? What we're talking about is learn and grow new methods of how you do the work. Your role within the organization, you need to rethink that at a pace that is appropriate. Otherwise, your own structures, if your structures are outstripped first in ownership leadership, then nothing else is going to work.
Well, the truth is that growth as an owner slash leader, certainly in a service-based business, and I know there are those that would argue in any base business, and I don't know who those people are. That people are where the growth happens. My ability to interact with people and really understand them and really listen and hear past the surface to what's really going on. I mean, this is not it's not some lovey-dovey thing. This is not some, utopian world. We're talking about strategy, strategically understanding your people, not like some cogs in a system, but they're actually critical. Like, you don't have a business without your people. And anything short of acknowledging that straight out it will actually enslave you to the business. You will be tied to that business. If you actually learn to work with people from the perspective of building an ecosystem that serves everybody, yourself included, you're in a situation where you really can prosper. And the thing that I get a kick out of, I've been working with this one guy, and I've been working together for about 8 months with him. And he's like, I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, we got a problem? He says, I don't think so. I said, okay, so what's going on? Why do you think what do you mean you don't know what's happening? He says, last week I took the full week off. My wife and I went for walks. We had part of it that we went out of town, and like nothing wrong happened. And I said, you sound like that's a problem. And he's like, no, it's just completely unexpected. I've been doing this thing for 10 years. I've never had a whole week like that. I said, well, you better get used to it, because you've just spent the last several months setting up your team so they actually can be autonomous and do their jobs. And heaven forbid what you did was for 1 week in a row, you let them. And sure enough, they did. And I said, when you came back, was there a bunch of problems? He said, no, there wasn't even one problem. I said, do you have a problem with this? He said, I don't think so. But he was unwilling to let it go. It was so different for him. He's like, well, what do I do? How about grow it consistent with what you really want? Oh, I could do that. And all of a sudden he got excited. It was so funny. And I mean, part of it was tongue in cheek, but part of it was like, it was just so bizarre for him. He couldn't figure it out. And so I get to poke at him about it now, and he pokes at himself now about it too. But it's fascinating. That comes when you actually treat your people like real live smart people, and you let them figure it out, and you let them do this stuff. And this comes in here, and it's interesting, because in Danger Zone 3, you better have that part sorted out. And if you don't have leadership sorted out by then, you are going to have problems, because it's between 5 and 10 that you need the leadership, and then of course we go back to Danger Zone 4, or we move on to Danger Zone 4. It's probably the time when it's good to rethink the whole business. What are the structures for the whole business? Because what happens is you're too small for a $20 million company. You're too big for a $10 million company. And you can't afford the structures in the interim. It really is a no man's land as far as that's concerned. And there's this chasm, this hole that's there, and it's really hard to make money. The key is to rethink the processes and then do the run for the roses. Get to 20 as quickly as possible. Because the good news is, once you get to 20, going to 30, if you wanted to continue to grow, going to 30 or even 40 is actually not that hard. And you don't hit another danger zone until about 40 million. So that's the good news on that one. Now, you don't have to grow it because you don't want to grow it for the sake of growing it. A lot of times people want to grow it either due to increased reach and impact of what they're contributing, or they want to create opportunities for their people to grow. There's so many different ways or reasons why people actually want to grow their companies. The good news is once you're past that particular danger zone, though, there's not another one going to come up and bite you for a while. So if you can deal with each of those four, those are the main structures you want to look at. And, in danger zones 3 and 4, the other thing you keep an eye on is silos. How do I actually have teams talking to each other so that they don't fall into silos? If they talk to each other, they understand each other and they naturally want to help. If they don't talk to each other, they protect their resources from each other. And that actually just gets in their way as far as that side of it's concerned. So we've talked about the framework. We've also talked about some of the structures that probably want more focus than others in the danger zones themselves. So that's all I have to say about those parts.
Yeah. And okay, somewhere on this, somebody's listening because you just sort of teased it. And I don't want to lose this point.
Okay.
That growth for the sake of growth, right? People growing revenue for the sake of revenue. And this whole idea, we've been talking about freedom. It's called the freedom framework.
Right.
And we're talking about freedom for the owner, freedom in the business, freedom from the business, freedom because of the business. And we're talking about, the lifestyle they want to live and being able to get away. And you just talked about one story about an owner getting away and realizing there's no problems. And it's like, oh my gosh, I actually had a vacation. It sounds like it's all about the owner, but it's not.
Well, it does sound like it's about the owner. And for a lot of owners, it is about the owner. But the problem is that the minute it's just about the owner, it doesn't work. The truth is that seeking your own freedom is not a selfish act. The only way an owner can gain the freedom, or owners can gain the freedom that they want, is literally by building an intelligent ecosystem that serves everyone. That is their conduit to getting the freedom they want. And in getting that freedom for themselves, they're also creating a much richer experience for every single one of the people that works with them. It actually generates a richer experience for the clients and customers of the organization. It generates a richer experience for the people who work there in terms of their own professional growth and their ability to actually learn and grow and feed their families and all the other stuff at growing levels. It creates sustainability of the profitability of the organization. Like everything just goes better. And so if somebody just wanted to do this for the benefit of everybody else and didn't care about their freedom, then let's just call all those freedoms a side effect, because guess what? In an intelligent ecosystem, everybody wins. And not, again, like some utopian thing, like a really, really brilliant strategy to create a sustainable organization that makes a meaningful impact on everybody it touches. The truth is, I was going to, yeah. The only comment that I would say is, the thing we never forget, remember, we do have the ability to adapt, but we also are built to connect. Together, we really are stronger. And this just taps that.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the triangles, that speaks to the guardrails around the outside of the triangle. I think all of this works together. And I think, and I said this to you upon reading the book, Michael, that I think this toolkit is something that is really relevant and really important in a modern organization. I think entrepreneurs and leaders who take the time to understand this framework will not only be better off for themselves, but their teams will be better off, their communities will be better off. And I mean the community, I mean the neighborhoods in which these people live and the companies live, and their clients will be better off. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
I want to thank Michael for closing out this extraordinary 16-part Freedom series with us. His wisdom has stretched across months of deep conversation, and today he's left us with something that ties it all together. Here are the few threads I hope you caught. Freedom in business isn't about what you gain, it's about what you build for others. Growth comes when you start clinging to control and start developing people who can carry the vision forward. And when you rethink the heart of your business, you begin to see that profit was never the core. People were. But what does that mean for you? How will you act differently tomorrow? Or maybe the question is, what's already beginning to shift for you right now? By hearing these words. If this series has sparked even one new idea, I'd encourage you to subscribe, review, and share Paper Napkin Wisdom with someone who needs it. More importantly, take a napkin, this moment, and write down the insight that stayed with you and share it with your team using the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom. So here's my challenge for you. What is freedom in your business really worth? And what's the one step you can take today to move closer to it? Remember, small ideas written down become the sparks that ignite big results. Until next time, keep turning wisdom into action and make it a great day.